Hello, namaste, Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming in again. This is talk number 10 of our series. The series is called 10 Teachings of Bhakti, but of course the lessons will go on for many more than 10, so expect 11 and 12 in this sequence. Tonight we're talking about qualities of Godhead, and we're talking about manifestations of God and where God dwells. That's our subject for tonight. So thank you for joining us. Well, moving along, we have been talking about Brahman and Para-Brahman and about omniscience and infinity and infinitude. And this time we talk about what is sometimes called the secondary qualities of God. Not because they're not important, but they are not the existential qualities of God. Existential qualities, or the intrinsic qualities, are those by which God is God. So his omnipotence, omniscience, is knowing everything all at once. This is all what makes him who he is. What he does for the jivas, how the jivas can access him, this is known as the secondary qualities. But it's a little bit like I want to eat and I have to cook, and I'm cooking on fire, and the intrinsic nature of fire is its heat and its light and the fact that it can cook. But the secondary quality of fire is that it does cook because I'm cooking with fire. So in this way, the fact that it's hot is its essential nature, and the fact that it can cook is its manifested nature, or the nature in relation to me as the user of fire. Tonight we're going to talk about different secondary qualities, so-called secondary qualities, which only become manifest as the jiva experiences the God that we've been talking about as omniscient and omnipresent and fully aware, etc. So all of these are found in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta, but we have reference to such great medieval theologians as Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Vedanta Deshika, Pila Lokacharya, all sort of bunched up between 1100 AD and early part of the 1300s. So these Vaishnava philosophers, we owe a great debt to them. So let's go to the first one. First one is known as Solabhya. Solabhya is a Sanskrit word which means accessible. The fact that God is omniscient, that Para-Brahman is way, way above everybody else, transcendent, invisible, untouchable. That's interesting but irrelevant to us if we wish to approach him. So approaching him means that he must make himself accessible. He's not attainable by powers of the imagination or by personal effort, but Godhead, or God, is as close as the heart if he reveals himself to the inquiring jiva. And this is the nature of the being, the jiva, is to inquire as to the nature of the absolute, of which it is a part. So this self-inspection leads us on the journey to God, and God also has not only the capacity but the tendency to reveal himself and his nature to us. Solabhya. Next Sanskrit word is, I hope you're taking notes. If you take notes, it'll make it less painful when you come to forget things. You can look in your book and find notes that you've written. Next one is Soshilya. Soshilya, Prabhupada translates as perfect in gentleness. So although we have a mighty, all-powerful God, we also have a gentle God. How is that? reconcilable in the one person? Well, it is, because if God or Para-Brahman is absolute, then both things must be there, both the absolute power and the infinite, not weakness, but infinite gentleness. Another translation of Soshilya is gracious condescension. Now, sometimes condescending is a bad word for us, isn't it? You condescending, you're looking down your nose at someone, but condescension means descent. It means to come down, to be with you by coming down from a transcendent level to an immanent level, to appear in your life, in your world. Or, nice translation is, God's ability to freely associate with the lowly souls without losing his majesty. So he remains as majestic and powerful, but comes to our level. And Prabhupada often says this is like the governor of the prison. He can come to every cell in the prison, but he himself is never bound by the rules of the prison. He's the governor of the prison. So, comparing God to a prison manager isn't perhaps exactly what we need in this comparison, but it's the same elements are the same. But very much made up by the next quality, which is vatsalya, or loving. A vatsala is a calf, and to love the jiva as a calf, as the mother of the calf does, to lick the amniotic bag off the calf when it's born. The mother uses her tongue, which is quite rough. If you've ever touched a cow's tongue, growing up in the country, I used to, you feed the cows, and they have a tongue like sandpaper, but it's for eating and it's also for licking their children. So vatsalya, an affectionate mother cow licking a newly born calf, is the image created by this world. So in this way, God is also someone who takes away our previous samskars, or our previous baggage from the last life. Next one, karunya, or compassionate. So God has the capacity to feel empathy and pity and extend himself in compassion, and through the agency of either saintly teachers or numberless avatars or incarnations. Finally, audarya, or generosity. Generosity means when I do not have to give you very much, but I choose to give you more because I'm generous. This is audarya. Krishna is overwhelmingly charitable. Para-Brahman is overwhelmingly charitable in how much is given for how little we give. So Vaishnavas, when they approach these discussions of Para-Brahman, they do so on the basis that everything must be substantiated by using the Upanishads, and both Shruti, the Vedas, including the Upanishads, and Smriti, which is the Puranas and other literatures. So these are the primary authorities. Now, Ramanujacharya, from whom this list of 5 comes, has, using the Upanishads, has described that God has infinite auspicious qualities, or kalyana gunas. Kalyana means auspicious and guna means qualities. Usually we use the word guna as to mean rope, don't we? The gunas are pulling me down today. The 3 gunas. Well, guna simply means quality, but it can be a wonderful quality. And even guna can be a way of describing the qualities of God. So sometimes in the Upanishads we find descriptions where it is said that the Supreme Para-Brahman is without attributes, without qualities. But Ramanuja has said that this cannot be that God has no qualities, because no qualities means that which is the source of everything has created things which itself does not possess, like color, form, taste, sound, music, love, beauty. If all these things are not there in the supreme source of everything, then how can they be there in the manifestation? So when we read in the Upanishads that God is attribute-less, or free from qualities, means free from material qualities, free from material qualities. So he says that when we see descriptions of God as being compassionate, loving, or approachable, these should not be taken as metaphors, but as ontological or existential disclosures. So everything's based on the Vedas, but we should never think that the Vedas deny the existence of the personal Godhead. He says that from a metaphysical standpoint, perfection entails positive relational qualities, meaning that when we see compassion listed as one of the qualities of God, we shouldn't think that it's a metaphor. But if the jiva, the infinitely small spark, is to relate to the infinitely large source, then that relation tends towards suggesting that it's a personal connection. And the process of surrendering to God, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 1866, which is also one of the Upanishads, Krishna is simply speaking that surrender is one of the yogas, bhakti is one of the yogas, and ultimately it's the yoga that Krishna chooses to instruct Arjuna in the Chaturma Shloka, or the final instruction. So Krishna's final instruction, and Krishna is the embodiment of the Upanishads, he's saying, surrender to me and I'll deliver you. So it's one way, if not the way, of being delivered from the cycle of birth and death. So if it was not the case that God would be able to extend a compassionate method for approaching him, then it would be foolish to say that God has these qualities. So, but there in black and white we see it in the Upanishads. Therefore, Solabhya and Saushilia, they're not optional traits, but they're absolutely necessary for divine perfection. In other words, God must be compassionate for him to be God. God must be loving and affectionate in order for him to be God. There's no concept of God without these qualities. So then Ramanuja goes on to, it's a deep one tonight, but you'll thank me at the end. Ramanuja goes on to say that there's God's essential quality, and then there's his vibhuti. His swarup is his essential quality, the godness of God, and then the manifestation of God, what he does. So that's just a differentiation there. So although he says that one is the primary qualities of God, i.e. omnipotence, etc., and the other, Saushilia, Solabhya, is the secondary qualities of God, we're not to think that there's some sort of hierarchy. Rather, they are, they just describe the ways that we approach, that one is resting on the other. Okay, so metaphysical necessities, yeah, so that's Ramanuja. So, interestingly, after Ramanuja, another couple of hundred years later comes Vedanta Deshika and Pillai Lokacharya, the medieval philosophers. And what they say is very similar. But Vedanta Deshika, while acknowledging that these follow-on qualities, or the secondary qualities, are not necessary for God's existence, he defends them from criticisms that say that they limit God. In other words, if God is Soshilya and Solabhya, or Solabhya, which makes him accessible. That if God is accessible, he's less than God. But Vedanta Deshika knows, it says that his condescension, that manifests his supreme sovereignty. You shouldn't take it as a limitation, rather you should take that compassionate outreach and making himself less than the majestic and transcendent. That actually makes God more God. And he also connects that to the avatars. So if God comes from being invisible to visible, and from the transcendent world into this world where he becomes visible and interacts with the jivas, that makes him more God, not less, you see. And also, it's not just a trait that he has, but it's a mechanism of salvation. These things are very important because you have to have a God that is with which we are able to be saved from the Maya. So this is a sort of what they call a taxonomy separating things into qualities. Okay, so we've done that. Well, we also want to talk about the concept of beauty, because part of our understanding when we use the word Krishna, which applies to the beautiful form of God, is that there is such a thing of beauty which is transcendental, and that we are not simply projecting our own concepts of beauty onto an empty screen, if you like. Brahman is an empty screen, and we are somehow projecting our notions of what is beautiful onto emptiness or the void. Rather, all the great Vaishnavas, they say that if God is not beautiful, then again, ontologically, that means that he's lacking in something. So you can't say that God lacks beauty without running the risk of criticizing God for something that he's not. In other words, God must include all things, all manifestations. So within God there must be not only beauty, but infinite beauty. That's the point. So the theology insists that divine beauty is real, not symbolic, and that God's form is eternal, conscious, blissful, and intrinsically beautiful. It is not material. So when you see something of beauty in the material world, you're seeing a reflection of the intrinsic, essential, and transcendent beauty of God. So sometimes philosophers argue that if Brahman were formless, perfection would be incomplete. Because form, this is another one, form allows relational experience with devotees. Hence, beauty is not an aesthetic accessory, but a metaphysical necessity. Yeah. So when we look in scripture, not so much in Shruti, but in Smriti, we find that God is described. And this strikes us Abrahamic followers mostly in the heart, does it not? Because for us, for a being to be God, he must be invisible. Almighty, yes, but invisible, inaccessible, transcendent, not revealed, revealed perhaps in miracles and the passionate voice of the saints, but never to be seen by the eyes, even the inner eyes, and never to be imaged. This brings God down. If God has an image, this brings him down. But rather, there are numerous texts describing the Supreme Person as lotus-eyed, dark like a rain cloud, adorned with ornaments. This is a very interesting one, isn't it? Adorned with ornaments. When I, as a former Christian, first encountered the beautiful form of Krishna, I was troubled. I thought, well, how can, if God is perfect, and God is, as they say, as they've been telling me, all beautiful, what is the need for ornaments? what is the need for clothing? Shouldn't he just exist as pure God and nothing else? But I'd removed, of course, the concept that the decoration of God simply enhances his beauty. But as one poet says, actually the name for God is Bhushanara Bhushanam, where normally ornaments enhance the beauty of the face. Let's say earrings, for instance, enhance the beauty of the face. But in Krishna, or in Vishnu, the ornaments themselves become beautified by the face of the Lord. You see. Smiling with compassion. Isn't it much nicer to have a God who smiles with compassion? So these are taken literally, these descriptions. We don't take them symbolically, metaphorically, picturesquely, poetically, artistically. We take them literally. And they're manifestations of transcendence rather than ordinary physical substance. And for Vaishnavas, the passages that reveal Krishna's beauty are revelations of his divine nature, not poetry. In about the years AD 500 to 900, there was a lineage of saints known as the Alwars, and they were mystics, and they wrote about their inner revelations of the beauty of God. And this is a different concept, of course, that arises in our Vaishnava lineage. There are those who've seen the face of God. And once you understand that God has a form, and once you understand that God is compassionate, and once you understand that God wants to reveal himself and make himself accessible to even you and I, then it should come as no surprise that some people somewhere, sometime, great saints they were, had the face of God revealed to them and interacted with God. So in our tradition, in the Vaishnava tradition, it is not so unusual for a poet to write about what he's seen. Even someone sent me a piece of a diary that was written by a great Catholic nun, Saint Therese of Avila, and she was, she was the one who wrote The Interior Castle, wasn't she? About her mystic journey into the heart of God. And she describes a beautiful garden where the dark-skinned boy is decorated with flowers and attended by angels. A beautiful description. So it should not surprise us too much that one or two people in different parts of the world also have this vision of Krishna or Vishnu. So these Alwars, they wrote devotional poetry. There was 12 of them. And together they wrote about 4,000 poems, which are compiled together in something called the Divya Prabandham. It's still available. You can read it today. Beautiful, overwhelming descriptions of the Lord's beauty and his interaction with them. And in one poem called the Tiruvaimoli, Namalwar and Andal describe how the Lord's eyes captivated them, how his smile dissolves their ego, and how his form enthralls their mind. And commentators interpret these accounts as mystical perception of reality, not an illusion, not a dream or a daydream or a fanciful notion, or not simply because they're poets they have these visions, but the hard-headed philosophers and the logical analysts, they don't, because we also have descriptions of the great philosophers who perhaps weren't poets. You don't have to be a poet to have a vision of God, but you have to be a poet to write poetry after you've had that vision. But they're not exclusively revealed to the poets. So again, philosophically, the argument for God's beauty relies on the principle of perfection. Let me read this out. God is infinitely perfect, and beauty is itself a perfection. Therefore, God must possess beauty, but possess it infinitely. Otherwise, if God did not possess beauty infinitely, a higher beauty could exist apart from him, which is impossible because he's God. The state of God is that there is nothing that surpasses him. And the fact that people become devotees and that bhakti requires attraction, attraction requires beauty, and without inherent beauty, the possibility of devotion and loving surrender would not be quite as it is. So there's a formal theological term, sundarya, or beauty, and it encompasses multiple aspects of a divine form, including bodily structure, luminous complexion, compassion-filled expression, and graceful movement. All these things are described. Beauty is multidimensional and functions as a mode of grace. It attracts the soul, softens pride, generates love, and leads to surrender. So Krishna's beauty is a factor in our ability to surrender to him. It's an ability to surrender to him after the ego has been dissolved. So now Vaishnava commentators, they reconcile statements in the Upanishads that deny the form with the doctrine of divine beauty. So sometimes we find that the supreme, the absolute, the ultimate reality is described as nirakar, or no form. We've commented a little bit about that. Now, of course, as Vaishnavas, we hang on to the idea of the clouds surrounding the mountain, that if you approach the mountain, the first thing that you'll see is the cloud. So if you approach God, the first thing that you'll see is the clouds of unknowing, which, see what I did there? The clouds of unknowing, which are preventing us from seeing the face of God as he is. Do not think that it is easy. But again, we must say that this, when it says nirakara, it means that it is not a form which is made of matter. And that positive descriptions in scripture are reconciled with Upanishadic statements. Yeah. So third part of what I wanted to say to you is that we've talked about the primary and secondary qualities of the Absolute. We've talked about the beauty of the Absolute. Now we have to talk something about where the Absolute dwells. And of course, you may say, well, I understand this one. There is transcendence and there is immanence. And this, of course, is a classic discussion that takes place in philosophical schools of all ages in Greece and Rome and Germany and India. If God, or the Absolute Truth, is transcendent, how can he be with us in this world which is immanent? How can he step into time? So the fact that he's both at the same time is described in the Bhagavad Gita. But that's not our subject tonight. We want to talk about where is this God that you talk about? And again, Pancharatra, which is the other foundational literature that we've been talking about. It's a corollary to the Upanishads. Describes the categorizes 5 places where God resides. When you hear them, you automatically know them because you come across it. But so the question is, where is he and what form does he take? So Pancharatra describes 5 places. First is, these are very interesting. So this is only about 10 minutes, so we shall deal with this. First is para, and you can do this with your hands. Para, meaning the supreme, the highest original form of God in the spiritual sky. He's known as Parampurusha, or the Supreme Person, and in the spiritual sky he is served by countless eternally liberated devotees, or Nityasuris, either jivas who have been liberated or those who were never conditioned, ever. Next is Vyuha. Vyuha means formation, means the primary expansions. So Krishna expands as Balaram in our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Krishna expands as Balaram, Balaram expands as Vasudeva or Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha ultimately, and these expand into the Vishnus and different Narayans for the creation of the universe. So those we've also encountered. So then Vibhava. Vibhava means the multiplied. The multiplied. So we go from the supreme abode to the formation, or the in Greek theology this is known as hypostasis. God is one but manifests himself in different ways, and there's a hierarchy, but we'll see how that hierarchy is described in Vaishnavism. So Vibhava means the multiplied. So God, or Parabrahman, multiplies himself in the form of different incarnations. Incarnation, yes, not a good word, an English word. Best word is avatar, the original word meaning that which comes down, he who comes down. Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrsingadev and Vamana. All different incarnations over and over again in each universe for specific functions. And most of those incarnations accomplish many purposes at the one time. Next one. Can you guess? Can you guess? So we've had the supreme abode, we've had the quadruple expansions, we've had the incarnations. Where next? Next is Antaryami, or Paramatma, the internal ruler, that aspect of God which dwells within the heart of everyone. That means wherever there is a living being, and actually if you plumb the depths of the philosophy, wherever there's not a living being, there's also Vishnu. Vishnu means he who is spread everywhere, Vish, everywhere, diffused everywhere, and yet remains one, but is present everywhere. Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, Sahasra Aksha, Sahasrapad. Thousands of heads, thousands of arms, thousands of legs, thousands of trunks, wherever he is. So this, he's known as Antaryami, he's known as Upadrashta, the witness of everything, the overseer, the omniscient one, and Anumanta, the sanctioner or permitter. So Supersoul, Paramatma, Antaryami, allows the production of karmic baggage to result in your destiny, if you like, your character. Everything that happens to you is a result of something that you did before. Paramatma is also allowing that to happen. And if you turn to him, he modifies that and changes your destiny. And the fifth one? Fifth one, well, where could it be? Fifth one is known as Archa. Archa, the divine manifesting himself in an image which you can touch and serve. So this is a hierarchy, if you like. We go from the most inaccessible, in other words, Godhead is there, but you have no access to it. But God makes himself progressively available as we go down through these 5. Not so much available, the incarnations, they've come and gone, but they were here. They were in this world, so you could have had access to them. You may have seen an incarnation during your long period in this material world. But Archa means that God makes himself most accessible. You can touch an Archa, you can touch the image of God. It's God, but he has made himself accessible. He's limited his majesty. He's limited his transcendence in the sense that he's appearing before you. So now you may say, well, what about the holy name of Krishna? What about the holy name? What about the Srimad Bhagavatam? What about the water of the Ganges? Are these not also? Yes, they are. They're contained in that Archa category or deity category. Touchable, accessible deity is Archa. So the touchable, seeable deity is the image of the Lord. The Jnana manifestation is the Srimad Bhagavatam. The holy name is the audible Godhead. So all of these are touchable by the senses. Yeah. I thought you might like that. I hope you did. So the holy name is directly God, even though it's manifest by the material tongue, vibrated through material air molecules and heard by the material ear bones, the internal ear organ. Still, transcendence, or God himself, just as he manifests himself in the deity, which is made of wood or stone or metal or glass or paint. Krishna manifests himself in the material tongue, material ears, material air molecules, in order to make himself accessible. This is his mercy. This is his, and in this he's known as a sonic incarnation, or a Shabda avatar. When we come into contact with the holy texts such as Srimad Bhagavatam, we're also coming in touch with a localized intensification of God's omnipresence. He's present everywhere, that's all right, but you can't access him everywhere. You can access him only in localized form because you have senses. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or any Purana, or any sacred text, he's known as Jnana Archa. Jnana Archa. So all these manifestations are equally divine, but different Vaishnavas, they give them a hierarchy based on different criteria. So you've heard about the order from the most transcendent to the most accessible. I say transcendent because it's not that the divine name is not transcendent, but it's most transcendent as in out of touch, and accessible as being available to touch. So that's one list. Then, but if we look devotionally, we're interested in how we can access Krishna, then we are reading the list from the name to the deity to the sacred text, sacred places, incarnation narratives, and inner realizations. We're doing it in a different order. So, for instance, all of these are like, so probably these days, to use a monarch is not a good example, but the king may appear in his majesty, his majestic setting on the throne for the opening of Parliament or something. or you may meet the king at a garden party, or you may meet the king in a private interview, or you may meet the king in the form of a picture on the £50 note or something. But each of these is the king, but you have different relations with them. So hope that's interesting for you. One thing that I've tried to do in each of our sessions is to talk about a natural illustration. And different members have said how much they like these word pictures. So we've been talking about a list of manifested God spots, places. But I want to use the analogy of water. This is an ancient classic example. So para is our topmost transcendence, supreme, inaccessible. The jiva is said to be very thirsty for God. Even in the Bible, it says, may my heart, may I be like the hart, the deer, who pants for living waters. May I be like that. So the jiva is like a thirsty, very thirsty for God. So in our thirst, we want water. If you've ever been really thirsty, you'll know what this desperate desire to slake your thirst is. Unfortunately, the para, or the supreme transcendent abode of God, is like water, which is held in a cloud. It's a couple of miles above you. The cloud may be containing a lot of water. In fact, clouds are quite heavy. They look fluffy and light, but they're quite heavy with rainwater or water. But you can't touch it. Okay, it floats above your head. That's para. You like this one. Next one is vyuha, cosmic expansions. They're accessible, but they're like a lake of water in a faraway mountain. You could go there perhaps, but it would take you a lot of endeavor. And the fact that you're thirsty now, it's hardly any use for you. Vibhava are the avatars. They were here some time ago, but they're not here now, avatars. So that is, avatars are like a flash flood. They were here, they ran for a few hours, or a couple of days even, but now they're gone. So that also is no use to you. So it's very nice that they came. It's very nice that you can hear stories about them. Antaryami or Paramatma is like groundwater which is under your feet. Only accessible if you drill down deep, and that will take some time. So there's water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Finally, Archa, which is temple images and the Bhagavatam and the holy name of Krishna, etc. This is like a bucket full of water, or a pond with fresh, clean water ready to drink. That's fully accessible, tangible, and usable. So tonight we've talked about the 5 secondary qualities of Pada Brahman. Then we've talked about beauty, the nature of beauty, and that beauty is a metaphysical reality. And then we've talked about the 5 places where God dwells. So I hope you've enjoyed our little medieval theologian's look at the nature of the divine. Thank you. Namaste, Hare Krishna. Good, thank you everyone for being with me on that. Let's go and see if we have anybody. Well, we have a few viewers here. Yes. It gets more, do you find it gets more theological and philosophical as we go through? Yeah. It's good to do it sometimes. So we've got Judy, Mark, we've got Narayani, we've got Stacy, Shakti, Devi, we've got Elaine. Oh, hello, Elaine. Thank you. Elaine says, God having a form is indeed a hurdle for a fresh devotee coming from Abrahamic religion, but practicing Krishna consciousness solves that. Yeah. I hope tonight went a little bit in that direction, Elaine, to describe why it is intellectually agreeable, at least theoretically, that God has form, just as a metaphysical principle. It doesn't mean it strikes us as less unusual or sometimes uncomfortable, but it's something that we can accommodate, hopefully. But it is, yes. Pete says, I was raised as a Christian and could never understand how God could not have a form. And Leela Manjari says, beauty can be seen through the eyes and also felt within the heart. Well, I hope so. I hope that God manifests His beauty in different ways to the senses. In fact, Krishna is transcendental, meaning that Krishna can accomplish anything with any one of his senses. So if he chooses to allow you to see his beauty through the heart, of course that is the way, the inner heart is the way we apprehend Krishna, isn't it? We're seeing Krishna with our inner eye, not with the fleshy eyeballs. Elaine says that is why we found Krishna, I guess. Yeah, I think you cannot find Krishna unless you're looking for Krishna. And sometimes we're not quite sure what we're looking for, but we discover Krishna along the way. And somehow, in the beginning perhaps, Krishna doesn't match up with what we thought we were looking for. But as we persist, we suddenly realize, yes, something dawns. Mark says, God's form is restricted in Christianity and also Islam. Something I have difficulties with, but also explained that Krishna's pastimes. Yes. Although we do, one time Prabhupada said, give me the Bible and I will show you Krishna. So we do in different places read of the form of God or sitting at God's right hand. Some imagery is there. But then here's a difficult thing. In Islam and Christianity as well, the depicting God was left up to the artists, and artists came up with different sets of imageries, rather whether paintings or sculptures. And what that meant was that different tribes came up with different understandings of how God is great. So Muhammad, I believe, took 300 images of God and put them all in a big cube, which is a cube that people, the faithful, circumambulate. And of course in Christianity we have this idea that there was a big battle in the, when was it, 800, 900 AD, where there was one group with the iconographers who were very much given to the use of imagery as an aid to devotion to God, and the iconoclasts were very much against it.